好，OK，大家好，还有2位同事，Yushi，还有 Cole，Your time，OK，it's show time，所以非常高兴也非常欢迎大家来到 Playtime 上海，然后我会给大家主持这个 panel，先做一下自我介绍吧，可能大概就是台底下的观众里面大概有50%的人我认识，然后也非常希望认识剩下50%的人。我是那个赵伊江 Leon Zhao，然后在就是刚加入 Google Play 团队，帮助中国的开发者走向海，也就是我们今天讨论的这个主题。然后我们今天呢非常高兴有这个机会，请到了4位 panelists， 他们是跟我一个 team， 在 Google Play BD team， 跟在各个市场都有多年的从业经验，所以我们今天讲这个 Go Global Panel 真正是名副其实，因为他们都是从就是不同的全球的不同的地方飞到这个专门为 Playtime 上海飞到这里。然后待会儿呢，我们还会有 interactive panel 跟他们做，所以你们现在如果有 Go Global 的问题呢，也可以放到那个就是question 的 question box 里面。OK， 那我一开始先让他们先自我介绍一下，然后我们会看一下各个市场的情况。OK，please give a self introduction to yourself, and then we'll go through the slide.
My name is Ko Kim. I'm part of the Google Play Games business development team in Mountain View, California. I cover the United States and a lot of our Western markets and work with game startups from all over the world.
My name is Yoshi. I'm working for the Google Play apps and games for Japan market. So based in Tokyo and consulting the Japanese developers and as well as the consulting who want to enter the Japanese market.
My name is KH. I'm based in Seoul, Korea. I'm working for apps and games business in Korea. So I'm helping import and export process for all contents and working and then helping our overall ecosystem better.
Hi， 我是 Kevin， 我在台湾和香港是负责他们的 apps 跟游戏的 business development。
Thanks for the introduction. 所以我们下一步呢，我们就看一看各个市场的情况。Let's start it with the slides. Okay. So, cool.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the US market and then after this, Europe. And so this is just an example of some of the more popular games, actually games and applications that are in the United States. You may recognize the Clash of Clans, Candy Crush Saga, but it's just to note that there's actually a very diverse range of game genres that are very popular in the US, ranging from the casual match 3 puzzle games all the way to the city builder simulation and strategy games that you often would see in things. But actually, another one of our popular is casino games are popular. We also have genre representations from like many developers from all over the world, not just from Europe, but also from Japan and the rest of Asia as well. And also like applications are very popular. And so if you look at Pandora as one example, people in the United States, they love their music, they love their social and communication applications. The engagement is really high in applications like that, and so there's a lot of opportunity to find success in the US market. Just as I said, for games, diverse genres, some of the other things that have been very interesting is that there's a lot of multiplayer games. Before has been mostly asynchronous single-player games, but now that's been with better infrastructure and broadband networks. You're seeing a lot more synchronous or real-time multiplayer games. And so a lot of the games that are actually popular in this country, such as like action RPGs and all that, are actually slowly making their way into the United States. Some of the other stuff we want to talk about is non-games, so just regular applications. As I said, communication, social applications are very popular. There's probably a new picture taking, photo taking, video taking application that shows up every week. A lot of high engagement in that front. And there's also a really big growth of, I would say, mobile social commerce as well. A lot of friends, a lot of people are recommending what types of things to buy and what types of products to buy via these social networks. And so that's been very interesting to take a look at. In terms of payments, credit cards are very ubiquitous in the United States. People are not afraid to use credit cards for digital payments, but there's also a wide usage of carrier billing and also gift cards as well. But definitely credit cards is the predominant payment method. So let's talk a little bit about Europe. Europe is very similar to the United States. Pretty diverse range, but there's a couple of differences, right? There's a lot more hardcore strategy kind of games that are kind of seen mostly of the Western fantasy. So you think of the knights, the dragons, the King Arthur, Camelot, a lot of that mythology you will see as themes in like games. So like Empire Four Kingdoms is kind of like an example of that, a lot of medieval kind of themes that occurs in those games. But then you see a lot of other games too, like you see Top 11, which is a top soccer game there. And so they actually really like their sports simulation and football manager games in Europe, and so that's also something to take note of as well. And talking a little bit about market trends. If I'm talking too fast, let me know. I'm trying to get through a lot of this. So
if the translator is okay, then that will be fine.
Okay, but let me know if I'm talking too fast. So for a lot of games, as I said, very similar to the United States, certain sports games does become a lot popular, especially soccer. It's religion there, so a lot of soccer games are very popular. And also, if you look at the applications, so it's very similar taste, but it's not the U.S. version of those applications that are popular. There's actually local versions of, let's say, the like social networks or some of the photo taking apps and like the Instagrams and all that stuff. So you're gonna see, and even music apps as well. They tend to be like very local. I mean, a lot of the more popular music apps, such as Spotify and SoundCloud, are actually been created in Europe. In terms of payments, there's some differences versus credit cards. Actually, there's a lot more prepaid gift cards and PayPal usage that's occurred in Europe, but that's just a matter of consumer preference.
Okay, Yoshi.
Okay, so I would like to explain about the Japanese market. So this is the top ranking of the last week in Japan. So the compared with the U.S. and the Europeans ranking is totally different. Probably the in here is attendees are familiar with the little bit the characters stuff, and of course the Puzzle and Dragon is pretty long life, and then they making a good business in Japan market, and also those kind of the titles is all from almost from the Japanese market, like Japanese developers. And recent trend of the Japanese game industry is much player is super trending right now. So first of all, the monsters like making the much players cultures bring into the smartphone in Japan. Then many game developers are following those trend right now in Japan market, and also. Japanese market is quite different compared with the other market, which is usually prefer to play in the co-op or multiplayer, or not fighting each other. It's more like corporations and multiplayer and battle to making a boss or making it clear as a stage. That's the trend of the Japanese market. And also, generally in Japan market, the localization is manually get into the Japan market. So once the user who lives in Japan recognize that this is from some outside of the Japan or not culturalized for Japan market, then user will leave. So I recommend to who want to come to the Japan market, then localization is the most important things to get into the Japan market. And the game system it's pretty complicated, but the casual games plus gacha system plus merge evolutions glows, it's pretty popular in Japan, and live operation is important too. So in terms of the live operations, so many live operation parallelly in the one game, like 20 live operation in the one game in Delhi. That's the usual in Japan market. So live operation is quite difficult to operate, but that's making the user retention is going up. That's the things. And the non-game side, the subscription business model is pretty popular in Japan, because the Japanese user pretty familiar with pay the mobile contents. Since the feature phone mobile contents, which is iMode ecosystem, was in there, and also the user-only choice is subscription. Then user move to the smartphone, then their family was payment to the digital contents with a subscription. That's the trend right now. And also the education and shopping is getting popular on the smartphone as well. That's pretty similar with the US market, I guess. And then payment system, direct carry billing, credit card, and Google Play gift card, all payment system is available in Japan. But a Japanese user allowed to spend, pay the money on the direct carry billing.
Okay, Catch. So it's actually easy to remember Catch name because he's responsible for Korea. So.
Actually, the screen that you are seeing is we announced the best application and games of 2014 last week, and then those are our best game titles and applications of 2014. For Korea market, actually last year we saw that huge growth with social games. There are many project games, but this year we saw that market changed very quickly. So the most popular genre is action RPG or MMORPG. So you can see that the Summoner's War, for example, there are some very popular RPG titles in the chart, and then for sure Clash of Clans they are working very well in Korea. So actually they have been the #1 placement of our top grossing chart for a while. Next slide, please. So the hardcore action RPG very popular, and then for those game developers, their common marketing strategy is to have a pre-registrations. So that's in common activities, and also the one unique fact for Korea market is when you think of entering Korea market, you need to have a lot of contents because Korean users, they're very aggressive, so they are consume every content in a week. So you need to think of preparing enough contents for the titles, and for sure going global initiative is a main agenda for Korean developers. For non-game side, the O2O service is very hot. So for example, food delivery service is very competitive in Korea. So the many companies are thinking of connecting offline to mobile. That is mainstreams, and also for like Uber. There's Uber in Korea, but there are another Uber-like services emerging. So that kind of O2O is very important in Korea. Also because we have a very high penetration of credit card. So the m-commerce is soaring in Korea too. Other than that, the lifestyle utility applications is getting popular and popular. For payment, we just launched Google Gift Card last month, and with that, direct carry billing and credit card, those three are main forms of payment for Korea market.
Okay, Kevin.
So I took this screenshot last week, and I think it's just games, not apps and games. So I apologize for anyone who's in apps. But the only difference between this chart and the apps chart is that they have it's just one app, and that's Line. So there are no other apps in the top grossing and I think the top 100 grossing apps and games in Taiwan, there is only one app, and that is Line. And so if you look here, Taiwan's a very interesting market. Notably missing from this list is a lot of Western titles. Candy Crush is the only Western title. There's no Clash of Clans. There's no Machine Zone. There's none of these bigger Western devs that have gone global to Taiwan yet. Next slide. So unlike Japan and Korea, though, there's no incumbent. There hasn't been a #1 grosser that stays in that spot. Whereas in other markets like around the world, you might actually see, Gung Ho and Mixi don't really move that much, and they might switch between 1 and 2, but they don't. They've been #1 for weeks, right? and or maybe more than that, maybe months. And in Taiwan, that chart, if you go back one slide, the 1 through 5, actually 1 through 7 have all switched spots pretty much every week. So based on their event schedule, when I took this, Line Rangers just did a major event, big sale, right, live operations. But before this, they were number 10. So they went to number 10 to number 2 when they do an event, and then they drop back to 10 after this. So if you look at it right now, they're probably not even top 10. So if you go back to the next slide. All right. So the interesting thing is that Taiwan is now a number 5, top 5 global revenue market for Google Play. There's been an increase of 25% of Chinese, Zhongguo, mainland Chinese developers in top grossing since the beginning of this year alone. So a lot more of the Chinese developers are now coming to Taiwan, whereas before it was mostly Taiwanese developers or Taiwanese publishers and Japan and Korean content. So as you can tell, Japan and Korea, the content is very prevalent, but a lot of times the monetization model in Taiwan is a lot different. One of the things I've noticed as a consumer playing a lot of Chinese games is basically, I might play the Japanese version of the game, and then I play the Taiwanese version of the same game. And the monetization model, if they don't change it, it doesn't do that well in terms of top grossing charts. The game is still fun, but I think it's a lot because of the gacha system in Japan. If I spend a lot of money to buy something, I expect to get something worth that value. So, 像我花100块，我要一个100块的 item， 我不要100块 and 我一直玩那个 gacha and 我都没有拿到什么。Right? That's very normal in Japan, where you might just do gacha over and over and you never win anything, and they'll keep spending. But in Chinese, I feel like if we spend $100, we expect to get an item worth.
So the Chinese don't believe in luck.
So this is one of those things that you always want to keep in mind of the monetization model too, and also competition is very fierce, right? When between people, whereas Yoshi just said everybody wants to work together in Japan. In Taiwan, Hong Kong games, or at least in Chinese developer games, I noticed that it's all about competition. I want to be the best. I don't want to work together. I want to be the best, right? So it's also interesting to note that Taiwanese people spend most of the time on their mobile devices than anywhere else in the world. That's 200 minutes a day. That's more than 3 hours a day on their mobile device. So that's pretty crazy. And you'll notice it, like 去台北啊，搭那个捷运，你就一直看他们每个人都在什么 chat 还是玩游戏，还是看什么电视节目。So, still lots of policy violations though. Dana just had her talk, so this is good timing. IP infringement is very common. I spend a good part of my week taking down apps and games that are IP infringement. Sexual content also very popular in the sense that they do it and then we block them. And then spam installs, right? 刷榜, like 还是有人在用在 Taiwan. This will get you in a lot of trouble with our policy team. We can track this. And then third-party payments, 第三方, like still very popular in Taiwan in the sense that people try to use them on Google Play, but this is a policy violation as well. And then in terms of marketing, there's a lot of offline marketing too. So, like every taxi is covered in a game. Every TV inside the taxi has a game. Every bus has a game on it. Every subway station has game on it, right? So it's even the buildings are covered in games, right? And then in terms of non-games, though, they're still very, very popular. The one that's noticeably missing, I have social, lifestyle, chat, news, music, and video. Commerce is starting to change a lot now, where like all the big sites in Taiwan, like PC Home, 17 Life, Ichi Life, all these kind of apps, they're all making very, very strong material design apps. So you can do a lot of browsing, because they shared with me that I think something like over 40% of their interactions on mobile commerce they all happen on mobile compared to web, whereas only a year ago in Taiwan, this was people didn't use their phones as much, and mostly because 3G became much more widespread in last year. In terms of payments, I know this has been an issue. You guys asked Brahim about it earlier this morning. Credit cards still very popular. DCB launched in May of this year. And we will be, we have people working on the gift cards, but we have to understand that it's not as easy as just launching. So.
Yeah. 有两个缩写，一个是TPP Third Party Payment 第三方支付，然后还有一个缩写叫 DCM Direct Carrier Billing， 所以是 No TPP More DCB，right？ 所以你们之后看到这个缩写在 Google Play 的 presentation 就知道它是什么意思。OK，Hong Kong。
再来就是香港，这是全部 APP， 所以你看也没有什么 APP 都是游戏 ，like they're all games here. Interesting enough, Supercell is not in this chart either. Neither is Machine Zone. Candy Crush isn't even in this chart. So not a lot of Western content in Hong Kong. As you can see, a lot of Chinese content though. Same as Taiwan, number one has always changed. There is no clear winner. In Taiwan, Hong Kong, there isn't somebody that is so powerful that they're always number one, right? Whereas in the other markets, it's like that. And I think because Taiwan, Hong Kong are still emerging markets. We don't have full payment coverage yet, but it's coming quite quickly. The growth, Taiwan went from, I think it grew 8x. Taiwan 从什么去年初到现在涨了8倍这个 revenue, so it's pretty crazy. 我是在台湾是因为我在7月的时候，他们就说看到这个那么多钱在台湾，他们说一定要去，一定要有。
Because you arrived at Taiwan.
一定有yeah. 是的。But given that HK is mostly urban, the average revenue per paying user is very high. So when I say mostly urban, 是香港是一个大城，it's a big city. There's not a lot of country, so everyone has a mobile. Almost everyone has a mobile device. So in terms of non-game messaging apps, all of them are very popular. It's not like Korea, Japan, or Taiwan, where one chat app everybody uses. In Hong Kong, you see a combination of all the chat apps that everybody uses. As well as TV and streaming content is very, very popular. And we do have credit cards, gift cards, and carrier billing. 所以点数卡、信用卡跟点心付费都有。So yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go to the panel session, but we don't have a lot of time left. 所以为了控制时间，我会问2个问题，然后之后我们可能会 take 1-2个 live question。因为他们都是各个市场的 expert， 所以大家正好利用这个机会跟他们去来互动一下。So I'm going to skip this one, but so you are you are the BD person locally, and you work with a lot of the developers, and you have helped a lot of them to go global. So what are some of the best practice from them, with some specific examples, if you have, I can share with the Chinese developer here.
Sure. So first impressions count. If you think about how your user or potential customer player will get to your application, eventually they'll have to go to the Google Play Store. And so really thinking about your visual assets on the store listing, this includes creating a really good icon that is actually fit with that market. If you've noticed, the icons in the United States and in Western Europe are very different than in a lot of your Asian countries too. There's probably a lot more female characters used in Asian markets versus in the West. It's a lot more diverse mix of characters and genders and all that stuff. But that's reflective of the market in itself. So really thinking about your icons, really thinking about your titles. Also, like video is a big converter in within the Western markets. A lot of users, like, they watch video. YouTube is very popular, and so having like a really good gameplay or trailer video is really important when you're trying to attempt to get in the US. And then once you get people to download and install your game, it's very important to have that good, very good day one experience. If you've noticed, games in Asia tend to be probably a little bit more complicated game systems and gameplay mechanics, and a lot of mix of different gameplay mechanics versus what you're going to see in a lot of Western markets. This is changing, but it's very important to have like what I call the first 10-minute gameplay, which is now really the first 2 minutes of gameplay, is you want to make sure you can get your users and your players into the game and really understand what they need to do and how to get to kind of the core gameplay mechanic really quickly. That's fun. And so the tutorial modes, onboarding, this stuff is really, really important. There's actually been, that's what I probably think is the biggest difference in terms of like some of the foreign games I see. I mean, Kevin and some of the others will talk about some of the other stuff, but I think getting that day one experience to be like nearly like flawless is very important and really worth your time to think about.
所以我们中国人也常说第一印象很重要，所以希望你们的产品能让用户、全球用户一见钟情。Okay, so for Yoshi, so actually so Japan is actually a big market itself, right? But Japanese developers still trying to export a game to global market. How they did it, and what are the things they did good, did well, and you can share with the audience here.
So for to export it from the Japan market is more like for they're doing like trying to make in the good translations. Of course, import to the Japan, like go to the Japan market also they're important to the good quality translations. And also the export to their contents, also that they're thinking the translation is the important things. And then they are changing the screenshot as well. So in Japan market, screenshot is pretty noisy. They're intentionally to make it noisy, like what's the anime stuff and the many game effect in there. But go to the Western market and they're trying to less noisy screenshot. That's their difference from the Japanese market. And it's depend on the market. So recently the trend of the Japanese market is in terms of the game, they're putting the voice in the game. And then sometimes they're not translation in those markets, try to make it more like this is from the Japan for like popular in the manga culture. And then sometimes they are changing their voice to translations, especially for in Korea, it's totally different from the Japanese culture actually. That's the thing.
So what's the difference in Korea?
I don't know.
I wanted to give an example of Come To Us. So I talked with the Come To Us people a lot, and then the main key takeaway is they really try to understand users in local market. So when they export their titles in Taiwan, actually the first thing they did is to cultivate communities. So we are seeing a lot of hardcore games in Korea too. But the interesting is the hardcore gamers, they want to belong to some communities. So they want to talk about the games. They want to talk about some events of the games. So the Come To Us really invested in cultivating the communities for their games. And then the Ace Fishing was the first title with that communities. And after that, with that, users in the communities, they could find success for Summoners War titles. So understanding the local users is very important. And then I can say that for Korea too, as we are seeing a lot of hardcore gamers emerging in Korea, you need to think about engaging with the Korean hardcore gamers in communities.
Yeah, Kevin.
在台湾跟香港，我觉得 最好的那个开发方式，他们会了解我们的 policy。刚刚 Dana 讲的我们 policy 跟我们的 core app quality，这个下午 Tony 也会讲。你看我今天早上我在演讲的时候，你看我有给你看一些我们现在在在香港的这个点数卡促销活动。这里的游戏，在我们会请他们一起跟我们合作这个促销活动，他们都是做好我们的 core app quality 跟我们的 policy guideline， 所以我们不需要一直问他们收他们的游戏，我们可以直接去跟他说，嘿，我们想推荐你的游戏在这个促销活动，和他们已经做好，所以我们就可以马上就可以选。像我要去每一个开发方跟他们说，嘿，我们有这个新的促销活动，我们要你们一起 participate， 和我们的 editorial， 我们的 review team 看到你的游戏，还是你的 APP， 还是都有什么 policy 问题，还是在用第三方是 IP infringement， 还是有很多 sexual content， 他们都不会用，因为我这个团队他们在东京在选，是我们在选，可是这个团队在东京，所以也是要了解，你们了解我们的 policy 跟我们的 core app quality， 就会有很多机会跟 Google Play 可以合作很多，去海外。
Okay. So first impression matters, a screenshot matters, community matters, following the policy matter. So maybe I'll just ask one more question and then I'll take one live question. So yeah, so what do you think about your market in 2015?
What will next year look like?
Yeah.
That's
That's
hard
the
to
top
say.
one. Maybe.
For Taiwan, Hong Kong, you notice that I know Taiwan is one. I go back and forth, but 2015, you'll notice that there will be a lot of people are looking at the same reports, right? They look at the report, they see how much Taiwan and Hong Kong are growing, and as they get better at going global, you're gonna see a lot of more international content, especially as Google Play, Brahim just talked about. As we increase payments in Taiwan and Hong Kong, these regions are gonna grow a lot more. So.
I think there's going to be a big rise of what I call game franchises. If you look in the console and entertainment world, some of the biggest, I would say, and most popular types of content has always been brands, right? There's a reason why Disney, there's a reason why Blizzard, there's a reason why like Activision and some of these other companies, Activision, Blizzard's the same, but if you think about it, I mean, they've somehow been able to create these franchises of games and applications that's basically been around for 10 plus years. And I think mobile gaming is coming to the fact that where it's not really going to be tied to the device, right? As we started out earlier, Android is now becoming a ubiquitous platform across multiple devices. We're moving towards a more hardware agnostic world, which means a lot of this content has become more immersive and will likely come outside the screen. And that's where like brand is really going to matter, right? So you probably have seen it's pretty easy to create any application that is an Uber of something or a Spotify for something or Clash of Clans of something or as all it says. So what's going to really, really start setting people apart is how they really, really think about their brand. What is this emotion? What do I want my product to stand for when my users think of my product? And like that's what I think is going to start happening next year. You're going to see a lot more talk about like what is that emotion that I want to elicit from my user, but at the same time, rather than how do I get a user to convert to being a paid.
I totally agree with the branding. So in Korea, CJ, which is top one of the top developers in Korea, they already started branding. So I totally agree with that. And then another thing is that hardcore game it will be huge for next year for sure. But looking at the casual titles, we already saw that. There were many non-gamers starting casual games after the Kakao, big boost of Kakao, and then we figured out those casual titles are quite old. So we might think that we can see some new casual title coming next year. So that'll be a interesting point for next year in Korea.
So we don't have that much time. So in Japan, so for the games, probably we will see more like multiplayer, real-time multiplayer games, play together with the friends. And in terms of the non-game side, we will see more like tablet and the material design optimize applications for application side in Japan market.
Okay, thanks for everyone. So we're already running out of time, but as promised, I'll take one live question. 有一个问题，现场可以问一下，我们有麦克风吗？有麦克，对，就是我知道你们很多人都有一个问题，但我不知道提问的人会不会问到那个问题啊。然后，
你好，我那个刚才注意到那个 Yoshi 的那个 PPT 里边有第二个，就是讲到 non-game 的时候，说到了那个 material design。然后我想问的就是对于那个游戏的开发者来讲的话，这个 material design 有多大的重要性？而且对于这些市场的用户来讲的话，如果我们遵循 material design 来，会给他们带来多大的这个就是价值的提升？
How important it is to implement material design in games? Does it matters, or do you see any games? Yeah.
I don't think the material design needed for the games. Game has their own world, like own game world in the game. So I think it's more unique design is needed in the game side. Yeah, co-op quality guideline as well. That's more like application side. But policy is important for games and the applications. No TPP.
OK， 好，那我们时间到了。如果有可能，其实我希望他们一直在台上跟大家分享。然后，不过好消息就是说，我们待会儿会分成 game 和 apps 两个 track。然后我们同时会讲一下 logistic 的问题，然后我们会有一个 break。那之后他们还会再上台，然后在 games 和 apps track， 如果大家有相应的问题的话，也可以再问他们。然后他们今天晚上也会在这里，然后你们可以找他们了解当地市场的一些情况。OK， 谢谢大家。